Yeah. Okay, we're live. Tree, thanks very much for doing this, mate. I've wanted to do this with you for a long time, and very grateful that you found the time to sit down with me. Firstly, we had a trial on the weekend. It was good to see you. I thought there was a lot of positives for both teams. How did you reflect after? Was that your first trial game?
That was our first trial game against other people. We'd had an internal the week before.
Yeah.
We were originally slated to play Gordon, but they took their top 30 away on a camp, so it sort of forced us into an internal. It made a big difference playing against somebody else. I think the guys found it a lot easier to, with internal trials, it's always tough to get up for. And the second you make a call, everybody opposite you knows exactly what's happening, and
Yeah.
so they shoot to exactly where you're going to be, and it turns into an absolute shit fight. But yeah, I think we got a lot out of it. I think both teams got a lot out of that trial.
I remember someone at the might have been Nathan Gray said that a trial is as good as 2 weeks worth of training, and I never appreciated that as a player because I just hated unnecessary games, particularly as I got older. But as a coach, you go, he's absolutely right. Like there's a bunch of things that you can only learn from playing games. Do you feel the same way now that you're a head coach that it's a valuable learning experience for you about how to plan the next couple of weeks and some things you want to work on going forward into the season?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, you think of when you're training, and everything you put into place has some sort of control factor on it. Even when you're trying to implement chaos, you're controlling how you implement it. Whereas in a game, you have no control on what's happening opposite you. You're basically having to react to everything in front of you. Whereas at training, we're trying to put these stimulus in that create a game, but it's still us creating the stimulus. Whereas in a game, they have to react. They have to see what's in front of them and play what's in front of them, and I think it's invaluable.
Mate, yeah, particularly you throw in some refs and country rugby and whole change of environment. It's I've been loving the last couple of weeks. We've been hitting around some of the local country clubs around the Hunter, and it just takes you back to when you were young, traveling around New South Wales playing country footy. It's just fantastic, mate. It's just fantastic.
I was saying to Hilly the other night, we forget we've driven 2 hours up to Newcastle, but Hilly and I are both country boys as well, and so you remember I used to play at 9 o'clock in the morning in Batemans Bay, and I travelled from Coombe to Batemans Bay,
Yeah,
just 3 hours. So that means we had to leave at 6 in the morning to get there for my 9 a.m. game under 10s, which would go for 40 minutes.
and you don't even question it.
Not even a thought. And it's just what you do, because Australia's a big country, and when you're going from town to town, there's a lot of space in between. And now I think our closest game was Bombala, which is an hour away still. And all the other teams are down the south coast. So you just don't question it. It's what you do. And country, that's what I love about country rugby. And everyone still stays around for a beer after the game, regardless of the 4 hour trip at the back end of it.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I'm living in Cronulla, but doing the forwards for the Wildfires. So sometimes it can be a 3 hour trip each way. So it's a lot of driving. But growing up in Coffs Harbour, you drive 2 hours for an hour training session to Port Macquarie. So it's not unusual, and a lot of the Sydney people don't fully appreciate that country guys will travel to play footy or train, and there's a good culture around it.
And I think we often in Sydney, and I definitely do. I go for a 40-minute drive, but I'm stuck in traffic for that 40 minutes. So I feel like I've gone nowhere, and I'm getting angry. But if I'm 3 hours of open road, I'm happy as Larry. It's just bizarre because it's still the time that you lose, but I don't feel like it's wasted when I'm actually moving. But when I'm stuck in traffic, I feel like it's an absolute waste of time.
About 100%. Hey, so you've just become head coach of West Harbour, first head coaching gig. You obviously had a long career as a player and have been an assistant coach previously. Can you give a brief or a long overview, if you want, of your playing history and then transitioning into coaching, and basically how you got to this position as the head coach of West Harbour?
Yeah, look, I like I was saying, grew up in the country, and went to Joey's, and out of Joey's went straight to the Rats in Colts in 1999, and we had a really strong Colts group that year. we had Michael Littman went on to play for England. We had a number of guys who went on to play professionally, and it was hands down still the funnest year of rugby I ever had. Was my 99 Colts year. Everything we did together. Thursday night was together after training. Saturday night was together. We're all on our double denim jeans and denim shirts every single week, and it was fantastic. And so I went from there. I had a year down at the Brumbies Academy the year after that, which was pretty injury plagued, and I got to luckily play the final probably 4 games of this season, and we won the Colts comp with Canberra that year, and again that was with good players, Matty Henjack and a number of guys who again went on to be professionals. Back up to the Rats, and we were a very young first grade group, to the point where in 2002 we lost to Randwick 101-21, but that group stayed pretty tight, and that group stayed together and went through to the 2005 Shoot Shield, which was a highlight of that sort of era for us, even though there was the Tooheys New Cup back then. But the Tooheys New Cup's a doorstop somewhere now. So, graduated from there up into, I had sort of 2.5 years up at the Reds, which was an indifferent couple of years for me playing wise. Over to Italy for 3 years, France for another 4 years, and then back to Australia, where I crossed paths with you again at the Country Eagles, and then a couple of years off and back for a final swan song in 2017 at the Rats for the which ended up in a Shoot Shield, which was again one of my best memories of rugby. And the path into coaching wasn't always or ever on the cards. Sorry, mate.
Yeah, mate.
I didn't have any great designs on coaching, and 2018 I probably tried to go down when I shouldn't have. They'd moved on. Benny McCormack was sports coach. They still had DC. Riv was down there doing skills, and I sort of hung on and ended up doing a lot of sort of bit part coaching, but it was more just so I could stay involved but I got great value out of coaching the lower grade guys. I really, really enjoyed that, and that sort of gave me the bug. It wasn't so much being involved with the first grade because I didn't do much with them, but I really, really enjoyed coaching the lower grade guys. They were great. And fast forward to the year after, Benny moved over to Randwick, and the forward spot opened up, and Gerardo was good enough to give me the opportunity. And again, I don't know how much coaching I did that year because we had such a set, strong group. We made the grand final and unfortunately lost to Uni just at the back end of it when they were able to roll out Tulilatu and Angus Bell into the scrum, and we just couldn't quite match that. But 2020 was probably my biggest learning curve of a year, which was the first affected COVID year, but it was also as we started to bring a few new players in that weren't part of that settled 2017, 18, 19 group. And that's where I first had to start to coach and made a million mistakes. And we weren't a settled group that year. I think we had the guys at the back end of their careers were, busy with other things. They're starting businesses, having families, and all of those other things. Whereas 3 years prior, earning their money so they could service their footy was their main goal. And so we're just in that real transition period.
What kind of mistakes did you make? I think it's valuable to talk about because a lot of people look at failure as a bad thing, or making mistakes as a bad thing, but everyone makes mistakes, and learning from mistakes actually leads to success. Can you recall anything that you did that stood out to you?
Yeah, I think I definitely over-coached. I think because we'd had the really successful season the year before, I thought what I was doing was really good. But the reality is what I was doing was probably average. but I had such a good group of players that they were able to mask it. Whereas the year after, we had a new player, so I overcoached and probably tried to go too far the other way of being full coach and not enough friend. Whereas because I was coaching guys I'd played with, I said, oh, no, I need to be coach. I need to be hard on these guys. I need to be hard. And I'm having to, call guys out probably unnecessarily in front of the group as a way of trying to show, I'm a coach. I'm not your mate. But I probably went too far that way.
Yeah.
So I remember a video session where I could have easily solved it with just an individual video, but I felt the need to show the group, and it was, I was calling out Wardy, who I deeply respected. It just wasn't necessary. But I was trying to overcoach and trying to say, I'm not your friend anymore, I'm your coach. And I don't think I needed to. I think I was more than happy to go, mate, you can do better than this, and leave it at that. I didn't need to, do a public shaming.
Yeah.
And it didn't go down well with him, and I don't think it especially landed with the group either. So, lesson learned.
How did you? So once you worked out that was a mistake, did you address it? Did you go to him and go, look, mate, I'm sorry. How did you address it?
No, that's probably mistake number 2. I didn't address it. I probably didn't realise it was a mistake till a year later when Wardy was retiring and coming back, and he started to come back at the back end of the season just to play some really enjoyable, fun footy. And then I realised I didn't need to do that. I didn't need to make him feel like that. I didn't need to make the awkwardness in the room. But I never addressed it with him. So probably, mistake number 2.
Well, if he's listening, Wardy, he's a great man.
Sorry, Sam.
Outstanding rugby player as well.
Mate,
going back to your playing career, talk to me about the 2 years at the Reds. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that was a bit of a transitional period for the Reds. They weren't having a lot of success during that time. Was that? It was roughly when Eddie was coaching them, wasn't it?
Yeah. So the first year and a half, I'd say we had Jeff Miller and Damon Entage and Alec Evans, who were the 3 main coaches. I'd done the Waratahs tour to Argentina the year before, and then we did another tour to Argentina with the Reds. I think having done that tour previously, I went into the next tour really, really confident, and I had a really good tour. Played some of my best footy I'd played in a couple of years. They were very, very, happy with how I was going. Had a really good pre-season up until Christmas, and then the Wallabies rejoined our group, and I went to water. I fell to pieces. And that's probably where I first learned how important the mental side of the game is, and how important confidence was to me. I played far better when I believed in myself, when I was confident. And just that small change of bringing in these guys who were, in many cases, guys I'd lined up to take photos with, that really knocked my confidence around. And then self-doubt crept in, and I couldn't. I had a period there I couldn't catch a ball, and luckily enough, they stuck with me, and I ended up getting a few super games that year. And but it was a really strange period. And then I built my confidence back up by the end of that season. I felt like I was playing good footy again. And then Eddie joined the team. He'd been sacked from the Wallabies that season, come straight back into the Reds. I think, you read his book, and by his own admission, he certainly didn't do his best coaching in that period. And he really, like, looking back on it, taught me a lot. But at the time, it felt like we were butting heads a lot. And I just didn't feel like he got me or understood where I'd come from. But looking back on it, everything he said to me was right. There was, which there's probably a few things to unpack here, but he really taught me what being a professional footy player was, whereas I thought it was getting paid to do the work that I was already doing. and I wasn't good enough to be that person. I wasn't good enough to just do the work I was already doing. I needed to do way more work. And the only reason I'd ever got to that point was because I probably was one of the hardest workers in the room. But then all of a sudden I got to where I wanted to get to and stopped being that person. And it took sort of some very harsh conversations with Eddie to make me realise that.
So there's a bit to unpack there. I feel like the confidence thing is quite common. I certainly had it through my brief experiences in professional rugby, and I think it's why I didn't go further, is because I probably was good enough, but when I got there, I didn't feel like I was good enough and went back into my shell a little bit and probably didn't put my best foot forward as a player, as someone preparing, or as a person, really, because I was a bit there's a word for it. I can't think of it, but it's where you don't think you're good enough to be in that group.
Imposter syndrome.
And look, I still have it as a coach sometimes, and you feel like, well, why are these guys listening? But I think it's something that
I have a little bit now. Like, I listen to your podcast and listen to the people you've spoken to, who are highly accomplished coaches, and you're chatting to me, who I'm very, very far from accomplished. I haven't accomplished anything, but so like it's slightly intimidating knowing you've spoken to Wayne Smith and Anthony Seibold and guys like that. But yeah, like it's a big part of confidence, and getting over that is a big part of probably day-to-day life.
How did you? So after you left the Reds, how did you learn to deal with that? Because you went on to have a really good career in Europe, played some really good footy. Was it something that did you speak to someone, or was it just that over the years you came to work out how to deal with that and address it?
Yeah, I funnily enough, it's probably a lot of the lessons that Eddie was giving me at the time that I didn't understand that I was then able to put in place throughout the rest of the time. Like he'd sit there and say, you need to be down there at training minimum half an hour before working on your skills. You need to be just doing that all the time. And so I'd go down and do it all the time at the Reds. But the reason I'd be doing it was so Eddie could see me doing it. I wasn't even concentrating on getting better. I just wanted Eddie to see me doing what I was meant to be doing.
Yeah.
And I guess I kind of got into that habit, though. So when I got over to Italy and over into France, I still kept doing that, but I was actually doing it to get better. It was one of those things. Is like, why didn't I realise what he was trying to tell me at the time?
I had an interesting chat. So I've been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a bit, and it's highly recommend to anyone. And I always talk to the coach about coaching, because he's a brilliant coach. He's been involved with some very, very good Jiu-Jitsu athletes. And he said to me, one of the biggest lessons that he learned is that he would be teaching a technique and he'd go over it and over it, and some guys just weren't getting it. And he said what he worked out was that some people just aren't ready for that lesson. They'll when they're ready for the lesson, it'll make sense to them, but that person just might not be ready for what I'm trying to teach them. And because I'm very hard on myself, and I'm going, well, I'm coaching this, they're not getting it. Fuck, I'm terrible. But sometimes people just aren't ready for that lesson.
Yeah, and definitely how, it probably makes you reflect a little bit on how you teach that lesson. And while the lesson was probably good, the way I was getting it was, mate, you're not good enough. You're at an academy level. What are you doing here? Which was maybe I was, maybe I wasn't, but that's the message I was getting. So where do I take that, and what lesson am I getting out of that? There's probably a better way for me to get to the same point without the self-doubt and the questioning myself all the time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I reckon Eddie's approach has probably changed over the years as more of an understanding of psychology and humans has evolved. That sometimes people need an arm around them, and sometimes people need a clip over the ear, and just working out what works for that person. Tell me about France, mate. What was that experience like? How did you develop as a human there? Just some reflections on your time over there.
That that period was some of the funnest rugby I played. I started that in Bayonne, which is a one-town team. We have Biarritz, which are our direct next-door neighbours. Effectively, it's the same town, but Biarritz and Bayonne are split by Anglet. So there's that huge, big rivalry. They pack the crowd, they pack the stands out. They sing these amazing Basque songs. It also was my first insight into the volatility of French footy. Our entire assistant staff got sacked. Bernard Laporte came in as our director of rugby midway through the season. Saw me play one game, said, nope, no thanks, and moved me on to Bordeaux, which was a deal done between the two presidents that I didn't know about. So I was basically said, you can go to Bordeaux or you can stay here, see out your contract, but you will not play. And so, it was an option without option.
Yeah.
It ended up being the absolute best thing that could have happened to me. So Bordeaux at the time were in Pro D2. Bayonne were in top 14. What I saw at the back end of that season with Bordeaux, and we got promoted into the top 14. And we got promoted with a group that did not have, whereas Bayonne had a lot of superstars. We had Troy Flavel, we had Craig Gow, we had 3 or 4 of the French internationals, and a lot of guys who, had played upper echelon footy, whereas Bordeaux were completely different. We were a bunch of journeymen who could just buy into being the underdogs. And we finished 7th that first season in top 14, which, considering our budget was sort of $8 million less than everybody else's,
That's remarkable.
It was a really good achievement. And we played really good footy. And we had to play a certain way because of our, we go into level 3s and 4s and talk about our team profile, but we were a light small team, so we just had to move the ball around a lot,
which would have been quite different during that era over there, wouldn't it?
Very much so. It was, their big thing was talk about combat. So it was, they wanted to maul everything. They wanted to take everything into the teeth of the defence and try and break down the walls, whereas we, by necessity, had to go around the wall. And so, we played some really enjoyable footy over that period. And going from Bayonne, which was a one-town team where everyone knew who the players were, to Bordeaux, which was very much a soccer town, and no one knew who we were. We could just go out and have everything Bordeaux had to offer.
Not a bad part of the world either, by the way.
Amazing town. Really enjoyed it. And, we had a good bunch of guys who had settled long-term in France. So, they bought their houses and they'll bring up their families there, so we could go and have the Sunday barbecues together at an established house. It wasn't like a footy house with big piece furniture, and the guys were making their lives there. I absolutely love that period. I cherish it. I'm going to go back for the World Cup this year, and I can't wait to go back and visit these guys. And I love that period.
What did you learn about being a second rower playing in France?
I think that changed. I thought I understood the set piece before I got over there. I thought my set piece work was pretty sound, and the first sort of harsh lesson I got was on a almost a frozen field in Italy, and I offered Ciccio, who was our forwards coach and went on to be the Italian forwards coach, offered him some ideas that we'd been using at the Reds, and he basically said, "Thank you, but I will not be taking scrum advice from Australian." And it was just the sheer amount of work we get through in those unit sessions. They were long, and they'd be an hour and a half to 2 hours of pure scrum and maul. And that Tuesday morning session, we wouldn't even see the backs. We would just, there'd be your set piece is your bread and butter here, and you're going to spend an enormous amount of time on it. And so we'd do that on a Tuesday, and then we'd also get another hour on a Thursday purely devoted to set piece, which, is a dream as a coach now. I wish I could be able to do the same.
How much of that's necessary?
To get it to a level of excellence, I think most of it, and again, it comes back to confidence. To be able to have confidence in the body of work you've put in during the week. We're sort of restricted to a 25-minute block, and you wonder, do players go into the game going, have we done enough? Have we got enough behind us? And you can only do what you can do. But we could go into a top 14 game and go, we've done 2 hours of scrums this week, and our scrum isn't the biggest, but we've done an enormous amount of work, and we know at very least we'll hold in there against this bigger pack.
It's funny you say that. We played Warringah last week, and Bubba's comment to me after the game was, well, we did really well in the stuff that we've done a lot of work on, which is 100% accurate. Like what you work on is genuinely good. It's I guess the battle for community or semi-professional coaches is working out what your biggest bang for buck items are to win games, and then spending more time on that. But we'll talk about that. Well, you mentioned some of the coaching courses. We've just gone through a couple together. One of the things that they consistently bring up is coaching philosophy. Now, I preface this, I haven't really sat down and nutted mine out and worked out what it is. Have you done that? Do you have some guiding principles that you run everything through? Or you're a bit like me, still working it out?
I think I'm probably more on your side. I'm still working it out. I've got one. Mine was because it was part of the application process for level 4. And so, I've sort of got it down as service, enjoyment, standards, and skill. And I sort of see my role as to service the ambitions and the desires and the want of my players to get better. And obviously, an enjoyment is probably the major building block to getting to those goals. Whether it just be, you know what, mate, I want to nut myself down as a solid third grader this year, or I've got someone who says I want to go and play Super Rugby. My service is to try and get them to that. And the standards, I think, is a huge building block of any team. You without some sort of standard and something to hold yourself accountable towards, you probably won't achieve those goals. And then, I just want to make our guys as skilled as possible. And I mean, you've played with and against me. You know that I cannot sit there and preach to anyone about skill, because I didn't have a lot. But
neither.
we've got Stephen Jones at our club, who is a catch pass guru, and it's such a blessing to have him there. And I can just see guys improving under his tutelage. So whether it might not come directly from me, being able to facilitate their uptake in skill through someone like him it's massive.
What surprised you about stepping up into the role as a head coach?
So far, it's just how little rugby I get to do. I rarely find the time so far to sit down and watch much of the game. I probably got through an hour of our internal trial of cutting, actually legitimately cutting clips up and getting them ready to send out to people. But yeah, I thought I'd have so much more time for that side of thing, and I'd be able to watch also all the Six Nations games and watch the Super Rugby games and then pick out bits. And I just haven't had a chance to do any of that yet.
I don't think you're on your own just quietly, mate. Getting to know a lot of the head coaches in the Shoot Shield, I think that's a very common thing.
Yeah, but it's not to say that the stuff I'm doing isn't important towards, I was speaking to Chris Deleuze yesterday. He was having much the same problem as me, in that he's spending a lot of his time being a real estate agent, trying to find apartments and things like that. And you've got to do it because, one, we care for our players, and we don't want them to be, we want them to be comfortable and housed and safe. And but the other edge of the sword is, I want them to be that, one, because I care for them, but two, because if they don't, they won't perform for us. And so there's a selfish bit in it as well, is that I want you housed and safe because it's going to give you your best performance for our club.
Yeah. No, that's I think it's interesting to point that out because I feel like once you get to the professional level of the game, it's probably more X's and O's, still be a huge amount of people management and the off-field stuff. But at this level of the game, the shoot shield level of the game, seems to me, just as an observer of head coaches, obviously I haven't been one, that the biggest part of it is the human side of it, the building of the club, the community, the culture, engaging with all the people off the field, and that the X's and O's might be the smallest part of the job, and trying to work out how to balance that. Because at the end of the day, we get judged on our X's and O's, but all that other stuff's important as well.
Absolutely. And I think one of the best things I did initially was we did, our offices we didn't have offices yet, which worked to our advantage in that when I first started, I met close to 40 players just for coffee shops. Kept Majors Bay Road afloat with my coffee bills. But it just meant I could sit down in an informal environment and talk to guys. And we barely even spoke about footy. Like it was just a good chance to get to know people and understand what constraints they're going to have on them, why there's going to be moments during the year where, I've got this going on in my life. This is why I can't make training here and there. And we weren't even talking about styles of footy or what you bring to a game or what your skills are. We didn't even get a chance to cover that. And I'm kind of glad we didn't, because I really wanted to go into this year with no preconceived ideas on anybody. And so having that little period was great. Not having an office, while it was not ideal in that I didn't have anywhere to put my feet up, at the end of the day, I'd drive over there every day and just meet people and talk to people.
How do you balance the fun element? Because to me, as you said, there's guys who are third or fourth graders who want to get fit. They want to be a part of a great community. They want to win and get better. And then you've got aspirational professionals, or in some cases, full-on professionals who will come back into programs. How do we get that right in the shoot shield? Because to me, I've seen it swing a number of different directions where for a period it was 2 nights a week. You drink together Saturday, Sunday, sometimes Monday, and it was a great time. And now it's become very professional, serious. Everyone's GPSing, tracking their meters. I reckon most first grade shoot shield players would be doing something every day. But at the end of the day, we play rugby for fun. How do we balance that?
That's a really good question. I think at the end of the day, we've still got to understand that the whole reason why any of us got into rugby was for that side of it. And I don't think necessarily we need to make training this jovial, easy. No, I still don't mind it being jovial. I just don't want it to be easy. I don't think we necessarily need to go easy at training to go, these guys aren't having enough fun. We need to chuck a game in here because they look like they're not having fun. We're there to get stuff done at training. But you can definitely set a tone at training, a tone of acceptance of a stuff up versus a blow up. That can change someone's value of perception of either having fun or not at training, and you're doing exactly the same stuff, but how you respond to any adversity within the training session can affect whether they're having fun or not. But I think the social aspect's got to stay. Otherwise, we'll lose 80% of our players. We can't expect. We'll keep the guys, top end guys who are going for professional contracts. But at the end of the day, there's still 3 teams that aren't getting any match payments, and they're there, 1, to better themselves as players and humans, but 2, to maintain a connection with people. And if we lose the people connection, then what's the point?
Yeah, I think that was really pointed out during the COVID period. is during that time we didn't have that human interaction. And then when it's come back, I think that's kind of changed things a little bit. And the other thing I think is, I'm convinced of this, is that even a fourth grader finds it quite motivating improving themselves as a rugby player. So being able to facilitate that, improving is enjoyable, I believe.
Absolutely. And I think back some of my most enjoyable moments as a coach. It'd be, in the preseason periods when you're running through your rotations and you might have some of your top squad groups rotate through to your block, and they're just working to upskill a skill they're already good at.
Yeah.
But then you get some of the lower grade guys come through and they're learning their skill for the first time, and you see this click and they go, oh my gosh, I get why we're doing this now. And it's this light bulb moment for them, and you go, well, that's why I coach. It wasn't so much to see player X upskill himself on something he's already pretty good at and then go on to the next drill. And it's that moment where you see this light bulb go off in someone. And so some of those moments were fantastic.
Do you have mentors? Like, do you believe in mentors? I've talked to a few guys about it, and some have formal, some have like informal mentors where they'll study like someone's career and from a distance. But then there's guys who literally have people that they talk to all the time. Some guys just have like a community that they bounce things off, who are, fellow coaches that they compete against, and just having that comradeship and sort of shared experience has been very beneficial for them. Do you have anything like that? Do you believe in that?
Yeah, very much so. I wouldn't say that I've got a formal mentor per se, but I sort of take mentorship as the ability to chat to you about some scrummaging points, or then I can call Paulie up and go, mate, this is what I'm having an issue with my maul. What do you think about it? And then I can call Benny Moen up about exits, and it's using, sure, I'm using my connections, and they're not formal mentors, but I can sit there and say, get ideas from people that I wouldn't have otherwise had I not made that phone call. So I guess, and effectively, they're mentoring me. One fantastic thing I've been able to do this year is catch up with Joe Barakat, who was the head coach last season, understands the place really well, knows the players really well. We've caught up a few times, and I can just run him through my program, see what he thinks. He's been a professional coach for 20 years, has seen it all. And he can sit there and say, have you considered this? Do you think that? And that, I guess, that would be as close to a formal mentor as I've got, and especially in a West Harbour sense, because he knows the place so well. We're texting often. He's been fantastic for me.
I couldn't agree more. Having people to bounce things off is just so valuable. So I think I've only been coaching. I really consider this my first full year of coaching. The last couple of years, I don't really count. But having the ability to talk scrums with Dan Palmer, go through lineouts with Dan McKellar, talk mauls and lineouts with Paulie, and seeing what they're doing, it's incredibly valuable. Incredibly valuable.
And that's where rugby is good. You make these connections, and a lot of those guys are, people you've played against, but still so open and so happy. We got to, through a little link, the Brumbies women are training out of our training centre. We got to go down and spend the day down the Brums and just watch and learn and be in every meeting and just
watching Laurie Fisher work is just amazing.
Oh, mate, great. And the simplicity with which he does it, he just has the same point and he says it 56 times per session.
That was the biggest thing I learned when I went down there, is that if you don't understand the messaging that they're trying to get across, then you just should not be there, because they go through it in the meeting, video and whiteboard. They send it out pre-session. They go over and over and over in the session. Then at the end of the session, the leaders will reinforce the messaging. So that was the biggest takeaway for me. I thought it was so impressive.
Oh, and it's simple, isn't it? Like like that. And that's a trap we can fall into. Sometimes overcomplicate things, and it's not that complicated.
What did you make of last year's Shoot Shield?
Mate, I loved it. I loved the fact that you couldn't plan around a week where you could probably have a down week. I love that. I think that's awesome, and that's so good. We've got to that point. It was probably stressful, you know. I look at ourselves last year at the Rats, where we're going into round 18 against West Harbour, who have nothing to play for, and have had an indifferent season. We win that game. We finish third, get 2 bites of the cherry in the semis, and West Harbour come out and put us to the sword. And it was not that we played poorly; it's just they played extremely well, and that's awesome. That's great. Like I don't know what it would have served us had we gone out and won 40-0. Like probably nothing. But in turn, we got given a lesson by a bunch of guys playing really good footy, and that was every week. There'd be upsets every week, which I don't know how long we can keep calling them upsets for, because possibly in the past it can be classed as an upset, but if it's happening so often, it starts to become a pattern rather than an upset.
I've got a feeling this year is going to be very similar, mate. Very
I
similar.
think so. Yeah, I think so too.
What do you think are the key elements required to win not only games of rugby but competitions?
Competitions is consistency, I think. Like I like to use the analogy that if you're like, as much, you know, I'm bringing violence into it, but if you're choking someone, if you've got a constant 7 on their neck, they're never going to feel comfortable, never going to be able to breathe properly. But if you squeeze them for a 10 and then let it go to a 2, they'll find their feet, they'll find their rhythm, they'll start to breathe properly again. So you just need to keep people at a constant 7 the whole time. But that goes within a game through and also into a season. Like people need to be under constant pressure. And it's just the ability to maintain that week after week, because it's a long grinding season. 18 back-to-back rounds with guys who are also working full-time jobs. It's the ability to maintain that consistently that'll help you win a comp.
What did you learn from 2017? I meant to ask you about that. Obviously, a very special year for the Rats. What are your key memories from that year? What did you learn from that year?
It was funny for me because I was going into a really established group and guys who had come from. It probably reinforces the value of a good Colts program for me, is because most of those guys have come through Colts, done their time through grade, sort of go from lean year 2015, better year 2016 to winning a comp in 2017, and it was just the same core nucleus the whole way through. And you know, DC came in and added a bit of cream on top with guys like Solossi and you know, Sam Thompson and guys who came in and really added to that group. But the core nucleus was why that group won. You know, obviously there was the tragedy of Lockie, and yes, it definitely bound the group together and gave us almost a higher purpose. But I think that group was incredibly close knit already, and it just and I'm not saying we wouldn't have won without it, because I genuinely think that group had the talent and the tightness to do it regardless. But once that happened, we just weren't going to let that season slip by without turning it into something special. And it was a really, for me personally, I was in my second year of the police, working night shifts. You know, so often I'd go to do a night shift on Friday night, get a couple of hours sleep in the morning, go and play, and go and do another night shift. And so it was a particularly tough year for me, and to the point where, you know, first 10 rounds I was probably starting, when then Sammy Thompson came in, took my spot, and rightfully so, because he was doing far better than me. But I could add, probably what I could add would be some experience in the back 20 minutes.
Which is very valuable.
Yeah, which has just come on and calm things down. And yeah, it was a very special moment. And you know, I'll never forget Wardy in that last after that last scrum, and he just, like every bit of energy just gone out of his body, he just collapsed, and people just got around him, and it was a huge moment for him and his family.
I think most people watching that game really felt happy for you guys. I certainly did. Is there anything that you used to be sure about that you've now changed your mind on? And you can take that in any direction you want, mate.
Look, I thought I'd be a career police officer. Up until 5 months ago, I probably still thought that, and all of a sudden here I am, almost out of the police, and I've moved on to coaching. Whether that only lasts for 2 years or not, but I never thought I'd not be in the police. I had my career path plotted out. I knew where I wanted to get to. I'd sort of been doing our courses and stuff. I worked through that to try and push me that way. That's probably the thing I was sure of, which I'm definitely not sure of anymore.
What has being in the police force taught you about human beings, about life?
It's a really funny one. Generally, in the police, like if you're interacting with someone, they're having a bad moment. Like whether they're under arrest for doing something bad, or they're a victim, or they're under the influence of drugs, like whatever it may be, the reason you're interacting with people is because they're having one of their worst moments of their life, and you go from that to someone else, to someone else, to someone else, and you realise it gives you a really big insight into people's lives, and gave me an opportunity to reflect on how lucky I am in many ways. You also, I probably learned through the police how to have hard conversations. It's a big thing to tell someone you're about to take away their freedom, whether they deserve it or not. You're about to take away someone's freedom, for whether it be for a night, for a couple of hours, for a number of years. It's a big thing to tell someone that's probably their path. It's a really big thing to tell loved ones that their family members have passed away. And so, I go into the coaching role now, and people talk about hard conversations, and I just don't think those conversations are hard. It's sitting there going, mate, this is the reason we've made this decision. I'm asking you to get on with it. Which is had I not had those other conversations, had to have those other conversations through the police, I think I would have found that extremely difficult. Whereas now I've got a bit of a reality check on what actually is a hard conversation and what isn't.
Mate, that's fantastic advice for anyone listening. Do you do much personal development on the rugby front? How do you attack learning new things? How do you go about thinking about it? Because you're obviously, formerly a forwards coach, still a forwards coach. Now you've got to care and learn about every area of the game. Maybe not learn. You probably have had a great understanding of a lot of different areas, but how have you attacked it?
Personal developments, I've got huge intentions to do a lot of personal development. I've only been in the role for 5 months, so I haven't had a huge amount of opportunity. I mean, I'd love to get in and just sponge from Paulie and Darren and Gilly and those guys and just soak it all in. I'd love to get up to Queensland, go and chat to Dan McKellar and Benny Moen and Mick Heenan, and guys who've been in, like Mick Heenan. I'd love to pick his brain because he's been in clubland for the last however long, and he's just cracked into the Reds, and it's more to pick his brain around clubland than the professional environment. Those sorts of guys, I really aim to get in and do some PD with them. It just hasn't come to fruition yet. It's another thing I'd imagine, being able to get out to the Waratahs far more often than I have been able to. But I still intend to.
How much do you lean on your assistant coaches?
Far more than I'd envisaged. I sort of thought the way it'd shape out is I would have an overall idea of what I want them to achieve, and I'd get them to put it into place. Whereas the way it's worked out, I've probably had to say, look, you pick up this ball and you run with it. This is your baby. You do with it what you want. And I'm just backing them entirely, because I sort of think if, while I initially thought I'd have some like directional say over it, why did I hire you if I'm not prepared to back you fully? And so that's sort of the approach I'm taking with it. Obviously, they do run everything through me, but there hasn't become a moment where I'm like, no, mate, I'm not happy with that. I sort of, and I also feel like, who am I to tell you when your speciality is attack or your speciality is defence that it's right or wrong? If you believe this is the right way, let's jump on the bus and we'll back it and we'll sell it as much as we can.
Love that, mate. One thing I want to start bringing up, and I've started recently with these podcasts, is talking about self-care for coaching and just people in general, because I feel like I'd read some meme or some quote the other day saying business leaders and coaches will do anything to help their people, but they won't do anything to help themselves. And I think that the ability to help others really comes from you helping yourself first. And that was a big lesson from my year last year. We talked a little bit about that offline, but something that I'm putting a lot of emphasis on this year is making sure I train most days, making sure I don't, get blackout drunk every weekend, maybe once a month, doing things that actually make me feel good so that I can help, the people in my life that need me and that rely on me. How are you with self-care? Do you think it's important? Is it something that you spend time on? How do you reflect on it?
Yeah, look, I'm really big on it, and I probably haven't even consciously realised I'm big on it until I sit down and go, I feel my frustration levels building so much that I have to, like you said, I have to go and train, or I have to go and surf or do something, because my wife just says, go for surf. She just go. She can see it building in me. And I feel almost bad about doing it, because it's like what I'm doing for work is an incredibly selfish vocation that takes me away from my family a lot. And then I need to go and train on top of that, which is again taking away from family time. And I need to go for a surf, which is again a solitary activity, but I need it. I'm probably better at taking it now in times. I'm probably more able to take it now in times where it's less impacting on the family. Whereas before, when I was in the police and coaching, I wasn't able to. I'd have to just take it when I get the opportunity. But I'm very big on it, and I've got this monthly membership to do these floats at a place called City Cave, where it's these Epsom salt baths.
How does that go? Is that the sensory deprivation one where you're just floating and you can't see or hear anything?
Yeah, exactly right. It's completely black. They play music for 10 minutes at the start to sort of get you in the zone, and then you just float there in the water for 50 minutes, and they chuck some music on at the end. I think it's valuable. The first time I did it, I got into a real little Zen state, but I hadn't started coaching at West Harbour at that point. Now I have. I get down into it, and I'm struggling to make my mind stop, but I still think it's important to try, because I'm still taking an hour out, no matter whether I'm stopping thinking or not. I'm still making that conscious effort to stop for an hour, because there's always going to be something to do, right? There's always something to do, but it'll still be there at the back end of that hour.
And it'll get done too.
Yeah, it'll get done. I mean, I find some, from 9:30 at night when my wife goes to bed till 11 p.m. is some of my most productive work time. Because my daughter's gone to bed, my wife's gone to bed, we've watched our show, time to rip in and get a bit of work done. But it's actually a really valuable little period. So, yeah, maybe from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. where I could have been doing that work, I've actually stopped and gone and done the float or gone for a surf or gone to the gym. I'm still getting it done. It's just later on that night.
Love it, mate. A couple of rapid fires and then I'll get you out of here, mate. This has been amazing. Do you read much? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you watch documentaries? Do you watch movies? Do you watch TV shows? Is there anything you'd recommend to the audience that you enjoy, whether educational or entertaining? Or
Mate, I'm a huge geek when it comes to Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, all of that sort of stuff. I love it. Anything in that realm, Game of Thrones, all of that sort of stuff, The Last of Us. I just love to get away from life, and that sort of stuff takes you away from life. Like you've seen my email handle. It's got Skywalker in it. It's everything. You know, I've been a huge Star Wars geek forever. I've watched every show. I've listened to podcasts on it. I use my time to get away from the world with stuff like that, and I really enjoy that stuff. The one book I'm reading is a Star Wars book. It's been sitting on my bedside table since I went to Fiji. It's probably got about 40 pages to go 3 years ago. But that's the last time I read a book was a Star Wars book. It's just more to get away and escape.
It's funny. I had Aaron Walsh on, who's the Chiefs and the Scotland mental skills coach. Fantastic guy, like amazing. And I said the same thing to him. He doesn't want to do anything educational once he's done his job. He just wants to switch off. So he listens to entertaining podcasts, anything to get away from life. Pretty similar.
Yeah, I know. Like in terms of podcasts, I really enjoy listening to yours, and I listen to Eddie's one on the way to work. And being I get 2 hours in the car every day now. That gives me time to listen to those two. But outside of that, I'm listening to pop culture podcasts. Like it's all it's fluff. It's got nothing to do with anything, and it's just a way of tuning out. I'll probably make 3 or 4 phone calls in that car ride too, which are work related. But then, I don't have anything deep or insightful to give you there other than
that's fine, mate.
I just like to geek out.
Mate, we all have our ways of escaping from the world, mate. We're both young coaches, so this might not be generally an appropriate question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What's a common mistake you see from young coaches?
Yeah, I definitely would 100% class myself as a young coach. I'd say it's overcomplicating, and again, it's mistakes I've made. You're trying to almost prove your knowledge, so you make this complicated drill or this complicated play that can be done in a far simpler, far more effective way. But you're trying to almost say, look what I know, look what I've got out of this course I just did, or whatever it may be. That's a big thing. It's just there isn't really a need to overcomplicate things, because you're going to have a variety of, like I said, you're talking about a Ford pack. You're going to have a variety of learners in amongst that Ford pack. So the simpler you make it to get your end result, why not do it the simplest way? Like if your end result is a strong maul, do you really need to do 3 slips and a 3 slips and a fake jump somewhere else to get to the maul, or can you just throw direct in maul from that? It's about you're trying to get to an end result, and the easiest way there is generally the simplest way there.
Wouldn't agree more. What makes a great coach?
Empathy, definitely. I think the ability to see a person and not a player. A strong tactical awareness of what your team is capable of. And I think you just got to be a good bloke. Like I really think that's a huge part of the job, is just have kindness in your heart and be a good person.
Love that, mate. Last question. If you could tell 18-year-old Cam Treloar one thing, what would it be?
I've heard a few people say this in this question for you, and it's 100% applicable to me, is you're nowhere near as good as you think you are. I look back at my 18-year-old self. I just finished Australian schoolboys. Back then you think it's because everyone wants you to go play for them because they think you're a good player, but it's really they're just trying to build their numbers. But they're sending you this blank. But back when we were leaving school, it was pre-email, and you get all the clubs would send you a letter, just a form letter to your school and say, "Dear," and they just write your name in pen, and they give you the same spiel they're giving everyone else and say, "Come and play for Eastwood, come and play for Rats," or whatever it may be. But it gives you as a young fellow a really overinflated opinion of yourself, and so I probably got to Warringah. I played my first trial match on there used to be two ovals out the front, and I played on the far oval out the front against Easts, and got absolutely whaled by somebody. And then as I placed the ball, someone else has absolutely shredded my back with their boots. And that just gave me a real quick realisation that I'm nowhere near as good as I think I am. And I'm in a whole different level. So, yeah, it'll be that.
Right. We're never as good or as bad as we think we are.
Yeah, most likely. And I'm extremely harsh on myself. So I hope that's not the case, because if I'm as bad as I think I am, then yeah, I'm in trouble.
Well, mate, I'm very, very similar to you. I've got a very bad habit of comparing myself to the best of the best, and I'm clearly not that yet. Hopefully I'll get there one day, but so you're always pretty much in the middle. Mate, that's a fantastic way to end. Thank you so much for this. I've enjoyed the hell out of this conversation, mate. Thank you.
No, mate, thank you. And I've really enjoyed your podcast, mate, so keep it cranking.